Okay, welcome in everyone to another episode of the NML Pickleball podcast. I'm Chris Ross, and we've got Jeremy Comazzetto, who is not to my right as he usually is because he's sick, and so we're remote. And we've got a special guest. We're doing video for the first time because of this special guest. We've got pro pickleball player, recent MLP signed player, Zane Navratil. How's it going, Zane?
What's up, guys? How are you?
No, we're good. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Honored to be on the very first video pod. Chris, I still don't even see you on video, but that's all right. Look at Jeremy. This is great.
Do you not see me on video?
No. Do you see him, Jeremy?
I see both of you. Yeah. So,
that's so weird. I just see CH and that little circle. Oh well.
Oh, now you disappeared, Chris. Oh, and you're back.
He's back. Okay.
Can you see me?
I can see you now.
Okay, well then let's get going. This is a great start to our first video and our first guest ever. So Zane, we wanted to have you. We haven't done a podcast. I was gallivanting across the globe, and I was out of town. And of course, I woke up in the middle of the night. I see a text from Jer saying, "Shit's blowing up." And then of course you're away. So I was away. And but Jer was doing a lot of the coverage, a lot of the digging for us, and we saw that you had a deleted episode of your Pickle Pod or an unreleased episode. And so I messaged Jer saying, should we ask Zane to come on our podcast? So we messaged you, and here you are.
Yeah. Well, Thomas and I recorded. Let's see. I think that was probably beginning of last week, which would have been maybe like end of August, and it was probably a more sensitive time than it is now. A lot of things were just sort of coming to light publicly. You know, a lot of people under NDA. I said some things that I don't regret whatsoever, but Thomas didn't want to have on. So yeah, things have, I wouldn't say died down, but it's definitely not as much of a frenzy as it was at that point.
Yeah, and people who are listening to this podcast probably are aware of what's going on, but we've got the tour wars. We got MLP and PPA, and a week and a half ago or whatever it was, there are a bunch of MLP started off by announcing they had some signings of players to deals, and that started the frenzy that you're referring to, where a whole bunch of people got signed. There was announcements of signings, where lots of rumors of big numbers being thrown around. So we wanted to talk to you about just the whole tour wars thing and get your perspective on it and get some of your thoughts that I think you've been more public than normal and not quite as diplomatic as I think you've been in the past. But I think we wanted to start with just some of the background about the tour war, so people have an idea of where this leads up from, because a lot of people are probably new to pickleball, might not have even started watching in 2021 or 2020 when the tours started. So I wanted to get your perspective to start off on just about, leading up to what started all of this. I think back in 2021, the PPA restricted its signed players to 6 non-PPA events. And where were you in all that, and how were you feeling at the time with the PPA, APP, and MLP wasn't even around at the start of 2021?
Yeah. So maybe for some context, I would say if you are somebody who's followed pro pickleball and you've only started within the last unless you've been following pro pickleball since probably late 2019 into early 2020, I would say you don't have a full picture and context of exactly what's going on. When did you guys, I know you guys have done your research into things that have occurred in the past, but just for my knowledge, when did NML come out, and when did you guys start following along with tour stuff?
NML came out at US Open 2021, but we probably really started following kind of pickleball sometime like in 2019, like watching YouTube and stuff. And then by 2020, we were probably pretty much full in, would you say, Chris?
Yeah, I think we were pretty much all in at that point. I'd say like really like Nationals 2018 is when we started watching more. And then at a certain point, we were just watching every tournament or following along whatever we could, whatever was happening back then.
Gotcha. Just so you know, I got to keep my my dog entertained here. He decided he needed to be needy, and that's part of the doing the podcast. Doing the podcast at home. So I had to keep him entertained a little bit. But interesting. So yeah, the tour, the PPA came. All right, you gonna be cool? You gonna be chill? All right. PPA came out. Let's see, that was probably early 2020. They ran their first events. Everything was pretty like fine other than the global pandemic during 2020 in terms of the tours. Like you could play whatever you wanted. I played some PPA, I played some APP. And then towards the end of 2020 into early 2021, the PPA, and I like to try and give credit where credit is due. They were the first people, to my knowledge, to start offering appearance fees. They started offering appearance fees to top-level pro players. There was a catch, and that catch was you could only play 6 non-PPA events during the course of the upcoming years. So that's kind of what the 2021 contracts looked like to my knowledge. I talked with the PPA, I talked with APP, and just decided at that point I felt like I was a player on the rise, and I didn't want to lock into anything exclusive. I didn't want to limit what I could do early, I would say, into my pickleball career.
And so in 2021, by the end, I think, what happens in 2022 at the very start, because I remember when this happened for us, is that we got, the Tom Dundon buys the PPA and all hell breaks loose at that point. So we start getting word of exclusive contracts and no MLP. MLP started, their first event was late 2021, I believe. And so at that point, there's a bunch of people scrambling. There's pressure to sign deals. There's timelines. There's deadlines. Where are you in all of that? And what are you thinking at that time?
I mean, I saw a deal from both sides. I really didn't like the exclusivity, especially going from being allowed to play 6 tournaments to no tournaments. And in 2021, I loved MLP. Like my favorite part about playing tennis over my entire career was my entire shitty career was playing college tennis and playing with teammates. Like for me, it's just so much more fun to have another group of people and a team that you're part of. I love that. And so I really didn't want to sign something exclusive. And that sort of signing period was where I started to really get rubbed the wrong way, because that was probably it was a very, very intense period of time. And there was so much like misinformation, outright lies going on during that period. Very high pressure. Like we need to know within the hour whether you're signing our deal or not.
Can you give other examples of misinformation or just outright lies that were happening in that time?
Yeah, and I'll let you guys name the name, but I was hearing rumors that I was represented by this person that was an agent for several players, which I absolutely was not.
Is this agent initial CP?
Who's to say? But yeah, so I had heard like there were just so many rumors, meaning like there were rumors. I remember this group of 4 of us that just got together And I think it was like me, Adam Stone, Deckel, Corinne Carr. We were like, I heard you signed. And they're like, I heard you signed. I heard you signed. I heard you signed. Did any of us sign? None of us signed. It said he represented you. Oh, I said his name. But yeah, it was him. But like it was just outright lies about who signed, and it made it feel like, oh, everyone is signing this deal and you're gonna get left out if you don't. You gotta sign within the hour. And yeah, that was pretty garbage. I remember being on a bunch of calls that like the players were just sort of trying to sort their own stuff out, right? Like it's supposed to be a player call. We're talking. My whole thing was like, whatever you're gonna do, whether you're gonna sign APP, MLP, PPA, whatever, just don't give in to this needs to be signed within an hour. Like take your time, go back and forth. You can even get competing bids from both entities. And on these calls were players and one agent that very soon after all this happened took a job as deputy commissioner of the PPA. So that's that was probably one of the things that had pissed me off the most out of this entire thing.
And you've never talked about this pissing you off in the past, I don't think. At least I can recall, I think it's, smart of you to have stayed pretty neutral. At least, you went APP, it looked team APP, but you weren't really laying into anything because I think you wanted to keep your options open. But as that year, so you end up APP, and you mentioned a number of people like Deckel, Corinne, Adam, all stayed APP. And so you still played MLP in 2022, but a lot of people got decent money. The PPA was giving out real money to players, and something guaranteed money was something that was hard to come by in pro pickleball. So I think at the same time it's hard to say that you can blame the players for snapping up those offers when there's real money coming their way.
Yeah, no, and I don't, right? Like I said earlier, I think the PPA kind of led, at least for a year or so, in terms of appearance fees. And yeah, guaranteed money. Now I at that point had reason to be skeptical of the money because I had very, very difficult time getting paid for everything that I did there. There was not great transparency on what actual prize money would be. There was certainly not timely payments. So that factored into my decision as well. And I think you see the repercussions of this coming down all the way into 2023. I think there are a certain group of players that have never had problems getting paid, right? And so when some exorbitant amount of money is written down on a piece of paper, they have no reason not to believe it, right? Whereas I have no reason to believe that number just based on my experience.
Can you provide any examples, Zane, of when there's been delayed payments or lack of transparency? The only reason I ask is I know you're not the only player that's put that out there, but I know Tyler, Loong, and Jimmy, who've been helping put out some of the PPAs, kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, but they said that they had somebody high up in the PPA tell them that every player has always been paid and paid on time, and they have receipts for that. So
I don't think, just before Zane answers, I don't think they said that they've always paid on time. They had a spreadsheet of when people got paid. So they said players always got paid. So sorry, you can answer. Sorry to interrupt, Jared, but I think that's just a small correction.
Yeah, I would say payers I always got paid until this year, and I'll come back to that point. I was always paid, but I really have no way of knowing whether I was paid the correct amount, meaning like, especially at the beginning of 2021, there was a period of time, which you guys noted, that prize money was advertised, but it was more accurately payouts, meaning prize money would be open to anybody who participates in the tournament. A payout means that's how many dollars are going out to players, which is a minute distinction, which I learned the hard way, because if you're calling something $100,000 payout, but 60,000 is guaranteed in appearance fees, it's not a $100,000 prize money tournament. It's a $40,000 prize money tournament, right? And so at the beginning of that year, I was doing well, right? Like I got to a couple of finals beginning of 2021, and I made $700 the first time and $750 the second time, and it took me months to get that money. Now I don't know whether that's correct, because I can't go back and audit exactly. I don't know exactly what everybody's appearance fee is. So there's no way for me in 2021 to actually know whether I was paid correctly or not.
And just to clarify, so the PPA wasn't putting out like in advance the tournament, like prize payouts for the different, like for say men's doubles, we're going to pay this for first, this for second, this for third?
At that point, not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah, it's hard to remember that far back even. It's only a couple of years. But I mean, they kind of do a better job about that now, at least in terms of the prize money. But
they do. It's much more transparent and clear now. And I don't think that the tournament payouts currently are an issue. Meaning, like, occasionally they get delayed a little bit, but I would say for tournaments in 2023, payments have not been an issue. It's payment on time and payment in accurate amounts, I think, were an issue in the past, but that has not, and I'll give them credit there, has not been an issue in 2023.
Right. So, and then you're saying, but those past experience, and you're saying you're not alone with those past experiences with payment, at least, or were there times where you haven't been paid at all, or was it just a matter of being paid on time?
I am currently owed a large amount of money that does not relate to tournaments. So I have not been paid.
Is this like an appearance type fee then that you're not paid?
I can't go into exact specifics of the contract, but it does not relate to tournaments. I've been paid for tournaments up through Tournament of Champions. So I have.
Do you know if any other players haven't been paid under their contract similar to you for 2023?
I know that there are players who were complaining about it earlier. I don't know the update on whether they have or have not been paid. Hold on, my dog. Murray.
Okay, we get a Murray appearance. It's not. I don't think anyone will be complaining about a Murray appearance from Zane. I think what I'm curious about, Jared, to ask Zane,
Okay.
like what I'm. Finish what you're talking about, Zane, first.
So yeah, I would say this year, tournament prize money hasn't been an issue. I'm current through up to Tournament of Champions. I'm currently owed money for prize money and appearance fee for TOC and Kansas City. We're still technically within their payment terms for those. So we'll see. We'll see.
What time period? Can I ask what time period of 2023 that you're owed money from still? Like besides those two tournaments?
Beginning of the year. There's beginning of the year. Basically, there's an amount that should be coming to me on a quarterly basis that has not come to me on any quarter yet.
So if we back up this trust stuff that we're talking about, I think the trust thing is the biggest theme of this whole Tour Wars chapter here. Like the trust, how much trust people had with the PPA, with MLP, and where that led their decision. I think that's the biggest thing. But backing up to last October, November, where this whole gold, silver tour cards comes out, and there's more negotiating that's happened. JW and Dylan signed Vibe Pickleball League that is created for a week or whatever it was. You're talking about that you didn't have a ton of trust in 2021, from that period of time. So then in 2022, when you did sign PPA, what goes into that decision there?
I would say it was somewhat reluctantly. Like the APP more or less bowed out of offering appearance fees and whatnot when Major League Pickleball and the PPA made their merger. I didn't really think that. I love MLP more than anything. If I had to rank the organizations in terms of the way that I like them, I would go MLP, APP, PPA. So I didn't think that APP was a viable enough alternative to forego playing MLP in 2023 and beyond. Now I could still play MLP, but the fact that they were offering us double prize money if you sign a gold card deal kind of made that decision easier. So I guess I wanted to stay with MLP. I was not excited about PPA, but I guess at that point I bit my tongue publicly, but I definitely let my feelings be known internally with the MLP team.
Obviously, MLP's hands were tied a bit, but how did you feel about MLP's decision to pay? Because my understanding is that MLP that's actually paying the double prize money, but they would only do that to the PPA players. So they were basically forcing your hand to play and join the PPA, but you still kind of have the trust with them, which is interesting.
Yeah, so actually that's something that came to light relatively recently. I didn't realize that Major League Pickleball was funding the doubling of their prize money. And I did, in hindsight, I thought it was weird that we got that money within a week. And now I understand why.
So you're not aware of that at the time then when you're signing, like you're saying it's recent. So then did that impact you? Like how does that play into anything with this round of negotiations for you? Or where's your mindset with going into this round of negotiations?
Yeah, so I'm close with certain people in Major League Pickleball. I still talk to a bunch of my team owners. I talk to a bunch of people that have never been team owners of mine, but like our other team owners. I knew some backstory on the way that the partnership and merger was going, and it wasn't good. Meaning, like, they were not acting in any way, shape, or form as a merged or partnered entity. They were very, very much so throughout 2023 acting behind the scenes as cutthroat competitors. I figured actually that this would happen at some point or another. Part of my decision and part of the thing that I've mentioned is I think that these two entities in the long term can't coexist. I think one will eventually beat the other or push the other into obscurity. I figured that some form of war would happen at some point. I wasn't exactly prepared for it in Kansas City, but it was a pretty easy decision for me to make because at the time, right, I'm presented with a contract from MLP. I then have a conversation with Connor the next day, and I'm presented with a term sheet from the PPA. We've got to turn these decisions around quickly, right? You want to make sure that you're going to end up on the winning side. In a quick decision, these contracts, I really don't think, honestly, mean all that much. And you're gonna be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But let me back that up. There's a lot of wording in my MLP contract that is up for interpretation. There's something like we're more or less employees of MLP for 200 days. Now, do I think MLP is for those 200 days going to have me working 12-hour days every day? No, but maybe they could. I don't know. So there's so many unknowns in both of these contracts. My decision was made entirely, like 100% based on who I think will pay me and who I trust and who's easier to work with. There could have been whatever wording they wanted in either of those contracts, and that's what my decision came down to. And I think that's what a lot of these players' decisions came down to, was just who's easier to work with and who do we think, when these numbers have been blown up 3, 5, 8 times as much as I've been making this year, who do I trust is actually going to pay me that?
So then where does that, I mean, there's different people have different trust levels, but where was the money in all of this, like for you? And I mean, we've heard for other people, the money, PPA was offering a lot more money at a certain point than MLP was. Where did you sit in all that before you signed, and then when you signed? Was it close?
I turned down an offer for 3 times as much from the PPA. So my annual amount would have been 3 times as much on paper had I signed with the PPA. But I didn't believe that I would. I did a very accountant-y thing. I estimated there's probably a 1 in 8 chance that I'm paid my full contract from PPA, just based on past experiences, based on the fact that I thought these numbers were not economic, and I don't think they are. I thought there's probably a 1 in 8 chance that I would get paid my full amount, and I thought I think there's probably a 90% chance that I'm getting paid in full from Major League Pickleball. That 10% chance is basically that both of these entities have overspent, they're still competing, and they're going to run themselves into the ground. That's the 10% chance I think I don't get paid.
To play devil's advocate here, Zane, kind of 2 questions. One, obviously a lot of it's due to trust. Did you raise with PPA the issue of the money you think you're currently owed when they presented you with a new offer? And did they have a response?
Yeah, I did. That was the first thing. When a big number was thrown my way, I said, okay, let's start with the several $1,000s you've owed me since the beginning of the year. And then it was like, oh, we need to look into that. We'll take care of that. I'm like, okay, well, we've been trying to take care of that for the last several months. I wonder what changed. So yeah, I raised that issue.
And then the second thing is you have a lot more confidence in MLP paying you out, but PPA does have a more viable, probably, business plan at this point, in that they have Pickleball Central, they have the different online commerce businesses, pickleball brackets, they've got the amateur side, they've got revenue streams coming in where MLP is putting out now huge amounts of cash. And they don't really, I know they've got some sponsors and things, but they don't really have an incoming revenue stream. Did that concern you at all, that PPA might actually have a better business model than MLP? And what happened if MLP kind of decides to pack its bags and head home?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a risk on either side. And I would say, like, I don't think that the cash flow generated from operations of PPA is going to be able to sustain this. Obviously, they have more cash flow than Major League Pickleball does, but I also think that Major League Pickleball has a better ability to raise funds. And if you're seeing teams being purchased for $12 million bucks, that's more or less like you have a certain portion of equity in the league when you purchase a team, and through some, I guess, backdoor calculations, that's more or less valuing the league somewhere at 300 million bucks. So if they were to go and, I think that they could fundraise, and I think both of them will have to fundraise to make this happen, without a doubt, right? I think that MLP can raise this money.
Just kind of further though, how many people are actually invested in MLP? And what I mean by that is MLP has, I know, like probably over 10 billionaires as owners at this point, but they have so many different owners at such a small portion of each of these people's portfolio that I think you could argue it'd be very easy for them to kind of wash their hands and walk away from it. Where I could actually argue that like a Tom Dundon, with being so invested in pickleball and basically being the majority owner of PPA and those other entities, actually have a lot more interest in trying to see it out.
Yeah. So I'd say I'd know probably at least, I would say the 5 of those 10 on MLP side, billionaires, I know and are equally as invested. I won't say equally. Maybe Dundon's more invested. So, but I think there's at least 5 of that group that aren't going away. And I can't speak for the other 5. I just don't know them. I think that the PPA is partially, Dundon's baby, right? Like it's a cool new thing and a very good opportunity, but he also has other stuff going on, right? And obviously, if you're a billionaire, you definitely got other stuff going on other than your Major League Pickleball investment. But I think that maybe those people, let's say they pull out whatever from the MLP side. I think your next wave of investment isn't going to come from other individual owners. It's going to come from, some institution that wants to buy in a decent chunk of MLP for $100 million bucks. Like it's going to come from bank money after this, or institution money, not more, or maybe like a private equity group type of thing. I think that's where the next wave of money is going to come to support some of this spending.
Well, I think this also comes to me, like I love the MLP product. I think Jared and I, like on NML, we love the MLP product. It just has been, I think it's more fun, at least in the, I don't know what it is if you have 8, 16 events, whatever they're going to do. But in this 1, 3, 6 events kind of a year thing, I think it's been super exciting, and I feel like it's a great product. But I'm a hardcore pickleball fan. Jared's a hardcore pickleball fan. A lot of people following pro pickleball now are hardcore pickleball fans, and I waver back and forth on this. But like about where's your return on investment? I mean, for a pro tour outside of the amateur stuff, a regular pro tour like the PPA or APP. And then where in MLP, where's your eventual return on investment? Where are the fans? You need fans to have a product. So I think I'm skeptical on pro pickleball just generally still, but I think it's an interesting discussion to say, well, what is like team versus this tour model? I'm going to guess you're on the team model for that this is going to work, but I think I waver on which way it's going to go, like, or which way is even better. I don't think we'll ever know, but curious for your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, I think that team sports just win in general. I think that the top 5 sports in terms of viewership are all team sports across the US, certainly, and I guess I can't extrapolate that across the world. But in the US, the top 5 sports are soccer, football, baseball, basketball, and hockey, right? And after that is golf and tennis. And I think what the team sports do a really good job of doing is that like community engagement. And the biggest thing that pickleball needs right now is not more people playing. We're already crushing it in people playing. we need to get somebody who plays at the park to go and watch pro pickleball. And I think that the way to do that is through community engagement events. Something like the Orlando Squeeze hosting tournaments over in Orlando and having one of their players show up, and then these people are probably more likely to watch and engage with the pro game. So I think that the team stuff is better for I guess growing the viewership on a kind of a grassroots level. Because if you think about it, like if the Orlando Squeeze are playing a regular season of home and away matches, like there's probably 10 opportunities for the people of Orlando to come watch a Squeeze event. Whereas if it's just a tour, you maybe have 2 opportunities to come and watch a tournament in Orlando per year. So I think that the team sport element of things is going to be a better way of getting a casual pickleball player into the pro pickleball landscape, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think where I actually buy into that is if they can make it into almost a club model, where we'll use the Orlando Squeeze, your example, where the Orlando Squeeze are basically a club, and not only do you have your Major League Pickleball team, the Squeeze, and you might have a minor league team, the Squeeze, but you also have basically a club that has leagues that all play in the Squeeze. The pros are around, so the people that are playing there in their ladders or waterfalls, whatever you're doing, get to know the players and they feel like they're a part of that pickleball club. I think you could really grow a fan base that way, and then also kind of get people having an actual connection to the players and team. That, in my mind, is how you could probably really grow it. So like basically everybody that plays pickleball in Orlando, for example, would associate with the Squeeze.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think that's the idea, right? Like I think that's definitely the idea. Just be able to be around the game a little bit more frequently, having a team based somewhere, I think is huge.
Yeah, and I think what I've come around on more recently, which I hadn't been feeling like this before, especially as, MLP felt more event based, but we get a lot of comments on our blog or on Twitter, Facebook or whatever, and a lot of people, and rightfully so, I think, skeptical of the team model and going, well, it's never been done before. We get a lot of it's never been done before. Look at tennis, look at golf. They run a tour. That's how it works. When I keep seeing that now, I think what I've come around to is it doesn't actually, like, why are we saying just because it hasn't been done before, we can't do something different going forward? Especially when, as you say, Zane, like golf and tennis are 2 sports that aren't quite, they're sort of in the mainstream. And I know as someone who, like, before I followed pro pickleball, and now I my other sports watching is diminished quite a bit, but I never watch an ATP Tour event other than they'd show the Canadian one that would come to Toronto or Montreal. And when would I ever watch a non-major golf event? I only watch majors. So how do you get people invested outside of the majors? For the most part, I think it's just hardcore tennis and golf fans who are following the tour events. It's sometimes hard to think about how it's even that viable when if you talk to anyone and they ask you how is the JW Marriott Open in wherever Arizona, like how did that go? No one cares. So I think where I'm at is like, if that for an individual sport it's so tough to break through, why not have a different type of model as your primary model, and that might be your best shot, because it's unlikely anything is going to succeed here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do think it's an uphill battle for sure. I think you can try something different, and I think a very good example of an individual sport that's been shifted to a team sport could be Formula One, right? everybody's in their own car. They're all racing, but you have one teammate, right? There's a season-long chase. It's really at the core of it an individual sport. There's one person per car. In pickleball, there's one doubles team out there at a given time. But like Formula One is, maybe this isn't the best example, but it's massive. And it's two individuals both running their own race, but they come together as a team. I would say that's probably maybe the best example of an individual sport that uses sort of a team format. You know, there's the Laver Cup in tennis, which people seem to really like, where that's I think it's like Europe versus the world. There's the Ryder Cup in golf, which people really like.
I think people's arguments against those is that they like them because they're a one-off, and that if they had like the Ryder Cup in golf every weekend or like 20 times a year, they wouldn't enjoy it, but they like it because it's special and different.
Right, and I think that's accurate, and I understand that argument too. I'm just saying, like, for those events, they are different. People like them. Don't know whether they would get old as a result of doing it time and time again. But also, if you were to do that over and over, it's not like, again, you have home and away matches. I really do think that having an event in a city multiple times per year is the most important part of the team element. It's not necessarily even which is more compelling to watch, but just the fact of having a team based somewhere. I think that's the most important part of the MLP model. And I think MLP, from what I understand, they're going to run several regular tournaments as well, because I do think it is important to have, you know, an understanding of who the best players are in a certain format. Part of what makes MLP is interesting is who shows up and who doesn't, who plays well at MLP and who plays better, who raises their game at MLP, and who maybe isn't the best team player and doesn't perform as well at MLP. I find that interesting.
Yeah, that's another one that's come up with all this Tour Wars stuff. When people are commenting on things, is, well, how are we ever going to know who's the best? And what I think about that is that, you know, there's a lot of team sports where, you know, we're trying to figure that out as well. I mean, you know, pickleball is more of an individual based sport, even if it's doubles, and you have a certain format that really does show who the best players are. But I don't think a team sport, even if it was just primarily team based events, I just don't know. Like, we haven't had enough events to be able to say whether, could I figure out that Ben Johns is the best player in the world if we only played 20 MLP events? Probably could. Could I figure out, you know, who's, you know, right in the middle? I think we do this in other.
Well, I think it leads to more debate, which isn't necessarily bad for the sport, actually. Like, look at basketball. Like, people love to debate who the best player is. And I think, like, it almost is good if it's a team format and it's a little more up for debate. Like, if maybe Ben Johns doesn't have the best team, and somebody else might be winning, and then you can have arguments like, is Julian Arnold or Ben Johns the better player? Even though we kind of know Ben Johns is the better player, but if Julian's, you know, won a couple MLP titles, bad example seeing as he signed with the PPA here, but just thinking up to the last super finals, it does open up for debate. And now I'm getting us a little bit off track, but on that note of talking about best players and kind of approaches to this, does MLP have a problem that they've got the vast majority of the signings? I think we've probably all kind of said MLP's winning, but does MLP have a problem that the definite number one male and definite number one female are both not playing for them? And I'll put it one further. When we're talking about, Chris, you were saying nobody watches anything but the majors in golf and tennis. When that changes is generally when you have a superstar. Tiger Woods got people watching and caring about golf tournaments on Sundays that they otherwise wouldn't have cared about. does MLP have a problem that they don't have Ben or Anna Lee? And then something the PPA has done is they've gone and signed a number of tennis players, but I think you look at Jack Sock, you know, he's going to draw eyeballs, and then we can all laugh. Like, I thought she was playing today, but I have no idea if Jeannie Bouchard had ever picked up a pickleball paddle before today. But, you know, she's got a bigger following than any pickleball player out there. She's going to bring eyeballs. And when my friends who are just about to start playing pickleball want to go watch, they're going to say, I want to see the best players. They're going to go and watch the PPA. They can watch Ben Johns, Annalee Waters, Jack Sock, and Jeannie Bouchard. And so I guess my question is, one, is that a big problem for MLP? And two, should MLP have maybe been more concerned about signing a couple of those type of players than, say, getting the whole Johnson Five, who I don't think anybody outside of the hardcore pickleball fans actually knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I don't know I know Anna Lee is obviously like pretty. I think it'll be interesting to see who shows up to MLP in September. Like,
you think some people aren't going to show up?
I know some people aren't going to show up. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Interesting. We had not heard that.
Yeah. There are a decent chunk of players that are not going to show up.
Interesting.
Yeah, there are a decent chunk of players that aren't going to show up to MLP in September. Whether that's their own decision or whether that's a directive is, I think, you know, something that you can think about. But given the current,
well, I'm gonna check why. If I'm a PPA player, why would I not show up to those events unless it's a directive? Why am I burning potential bridges when there's basically two employers and I probably want to keep relations good?
That's a good question. So that is a very good question, right? Why wouldn't somebody show up when MLP is a much better payday on average? There's usually more guaranteed money and certainly more upside. Why wouldn't you show up?
Well, that's also like, I think we're getting off track on Jared's question, but go ahead.
Sorry. So I'm going to toss two names and you can either not answer, but Ben John's going to show up. He played that exhibition there.
I would guess. I mean, I would be fairly certain. I don't think he would show up to the exhibition if he wasn't planning on showing up for the events.
Annalee Waters.
I don't know.
She's been vibing a lot.
She seems to be heavily incentivized to promote PPA. So it'll be interesting. I don't know about her. I would guess that Ben plays. I don't know whether Annalee plays. And those weren't even the people that I was necessarily speaking about, saying I know whether they were or were not playing. Yeah, it's a good question why somebody wouldn't show up to an MLP when they would get paid more.
And going back to Jared's question, do you think it matters that for next year that Ben, Annalee, and even someone like Jack Sock aren't part of MLP, or assuming they're not? I mean, maybe they could flip, or someone could flip. We haven't even talked about that possibility yet as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you, whatever tour you want to have them, like the vast majority of the best players at your event. So I mean, like, I think it hurts MLP if Ben or Annalee aren't there, but it hurts PPA just as much that Riley, JW, and Dylan aren't at their events, because then Ben and Annalee don't have anybody to play against. So they're certainly both, I think, both hurting and in the short term.
Yeah, well, I thought the Johnson Five and Riley and Tyson, well, especially the Johnson Five, I think that mattered more from the player's perspective to see which team am I on? Am I on the winning team, or am I on the team in the lead, or am I on the team that's behind? I think that that's where it mattered more. I'm, you know, I don't know how much it matters in the short term, but I wonder also, you know, from a long term thing, going back to the trust theme, is whether we have, you know, the way both entities choose to act, how they choose to, or whether they choose to dictate what their players should do with playing PPA and playing MLP events on both sides of things. Do you think that's going to impact trust or how people see their, you know, the entity that they chose going forward, and whether that could be a factor in if anyone flips?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah. So do you think that how the tours treat their players over this short period, next few months, matters from a trust perspective for the players? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it all factors in for sure. At this point, more or less, everybody's locked into a 3-year deal. So I hope you trust the person that you're with at this point, because it's gonna be a long 3 years if you don't.
Does that mean you don't see anyone flipping on either side, that they're so locked, like there's a locked in contract for everyone on both sides?
You know what? I don't know. I would assume. Let's see. When was so Kansas City was let's see, more than 10 days ago, right? So those letters of intent should be expired by now. And if we were going to see flips from PPA to MLP, I would say now is probably the time where that would start, right?
But one player of more than note, one premier player, my understanding, it has a contract through next year, but no further with the PPA. So it might be notable if he continues to play the MLP events.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're talking about there. I mean, if you're gonna say it, you can go ahead. If you're gonna just hint at it, you can go ahead.
Well, Ben, let's be honest, Ben doesn't appear, as far as publicly known, have a deal with the PPA through past 2024, is my understanding. And if we want to talk about what would probably be a near death blow to the PPA at this point, would be if Ben signed with MLP.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be huge, obviously, in the short term. And I think I have to give credit to the PPA again. I think that their strategy of going after the tennis players is actually very, very good. Meaning, like, a lot of players that I think have been signed to both MLP and PPA contracts are being paid a lot, right? These are very, very big numbers. They're not economic numbers. I think the play of going after Jack Sock and Jeannie Bouchard in particular is, I don't think that I'm not even talking about them as a player. Meaning, like, if Jack Sock shows up and doesn't win, doesn't matter. If he wins everything, doesn't matter. If Jeannie Bouchard does great, doesn't matter. Does bad, doesn't matter. The fact that they're playing on their tour, I think, is going to be very attractive to the PPA's next group of talent. Somebody who just graduated from Vanderbilt and is like, I want to play pro pickleball now. And if PPA is going to, or MLP is going to offer them, you know, a salary to basically go full time and train, like, I think that that's where our next generation of stars is going to come from. So everybody on these rosters of MLP and PPA are overpaid currently. Who can get new players cheaper in the future? And I think the tennis player strategy is a good one. Do you want to go play on the tour where Jeannie and Jack play, or do you want to go play on the tour where these really good pickleball players play?
And isn't that an advantage also PPA has right now? It seems MLP is going to get that, but it's hard to figure out how one can kind of improve their stock in the MLP format to a great degree, where I can go out on the PPA and I know if I start winning singles titles, I probably am going to get a better partner. I can start winning doubles titles and my stock goes up. Whereas MLP, it's like, what if I get in challenger and I'm on a bad team? Like, how do I really, it's the less proven model.
I don't know if it's more volatile in Major League Pickleball. I mean, look at Julian Arnold's stock, right? Julian Arnold's stock skyrocketed. Hayden Patrick-Quinn's was down low after MLP Mesa, and then it's really high after MLP San Clemente. Like, he played poorly in Mesa, played great in San Clemente. Like, I think that doing well at MLP probably has more of an impact on your stock than a given PPA. But obviously, I do think there's some. I think that there's your argument is fair. You can have a good tournament at a PPA sort of break through, and you're on people's radar as well.
I think I disagree probably with you, Jared, like in terms of, I think where there's more volatility in MLP in terms of where your stock can go, whereas on the PPA, as long as you have a decent enough partner, your results are going to be in a more narrow scope, I think. Whereas you look at someone like Yana Newell, you know, she's on Frisco Pandas, and there's no reason she should be falling to the second round of Challenger. Your Frisco Pandas, you know, I mean, your stock's
tanked from Frisco. That's
everyone's
funny story.
Everyone's stock tanked, but people, anyone who played for these really good teams, you mentioned Hayden. I actually thought Gabe Tardio's stock, well, he played so poorly, but his stock should have gone higher. But there's guys and players who rise way higher than they should because the sample size has been small so far, and you have each event, you have these small sample sizes. It's like, oh my God, this person's so good. So I don't know if I agree that that you can't.
Well, what I would say, Chris, is if I'm a player, I'm fairly new to the sport, I'm going to feel like I have a lot more control over my future stock with the PPA kind of format than I am with MLP.
Yeah. Well, here's one of my questions.
Especially if I'm coming from tennis and it's a kind of a format I understand versus a format I might not understand as much.
Yeah, I think this is my question for both of you. And Jared, we just haven't talked because we haven't seen each other that much. But how are tours going to keep paying players? Players say, oh, I saw this X player who's not even challenger getting a 6-figure deal. I want that. But how are the PPA or MLP going to keep paying new players in this way?
I mean, I think there has to be a look. I actually thought that we were overpaid in the 2022 season. I thought we were overpaid in the 2023 season. And in 2024, we are going to be insanely overpaid. At some point, this needs to be there needs to be a return on this play for the players. The reason why we're overpaid currently in 2024 is because they were at war. They were trying to basically eliminate the other. That was the investment they were making. We're going to pay all these people this amount of money so that we can get rid of our competitor, hopefully, right? At a certain point, we absolutely have to be coming down in the amount that we're getting paid. This does not make sense long term. And maybe I'll catch some shit for saying that, but I think that I think that these numbers are not something that you can build a long-term sustainable business on. Like, we definitely need to hit some big milestones in terms of viewership, participation in the minor league events or PPA events. Like, there are a lot of things that need to grow to support the amounts that we're getting paid. So I would think that there's certainly a substantial pullback after these 3 years. Like, something needs to fall over these next couple of years, and something will fall over the next couple of years. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'll guarantee it.
So then, Jared, will it depend on who's willing to pay more? I mean, assuming both tours are around at the end of 2024, and where are people? I guess you're saying people are going to be more comfortable going that tour model. I don't know where new players go in that MLP model. That's a question I've had as well. Maybe you create a minor league system, a feeder system, or they go to the APP, which I don't even think we've mentioned the APP so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the individual tournaments on the MLP tour will be important, and you've seen some players signed that don't have the best results, but are certainly.
Who's Zane?
I would say I'm good friends with Roscoe Bellamy, right? His results at this point, I don't think warrant an MLP contract. However, you can take one look at this guy, and he's like 6'6". He is an absolute stud. He has every single he has ability to be certainly like one of the top players in the game. But just on paper.
See, that's where I would be if we're signing 3-year contracts, and that's where I could argue that maybe MLP got a little lost in the weeds. I would want to be betting on who I think is going to be the best player in 2 and 3 years versus past performance. And that's why I think, as you've already said, those tennis contracts are interesting because they draw eyeballs, and also there's upside potential, where I could argue that on the MLP side in particular, they paid a lot for fairly mediocre past performance.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. And I think if somehow MLP and PPA remain in this stalemate after 3 years, which they won't, there'll be enormous moves one way or another, right? It will all be about whose tour is more attractive, where people want to play it, and they don't need to get guaranteed amounts of money to do so, right? Because they can't keep funding the guaranteed amounts.
What odds would you give that both the PPA and MLP play separate tours throughout 2024?
So what odds do I give that both of them exist in their current state by the end of 2024?
Yeah.
15%.
1.5?
1.5.
That might be high, I think, but probably fair.
So then what's happening if there's such a low chance that they're going to stay as they are right now? What is it? Do you have a prediction for what it's going to be?
I do.
Do you want to share it?
I don't.
Jared, do you have a prediction?
I think we'll see. My prediction is it'll be an MLP banner in 2024. I think the PPA as we know it won't continue, but what the ownership structure of that MLP looks like will be interesting, and leadership structure.
So I think, yeah, and I don't know if you have too much more, Zane. We'll probably get it wrapped up here pretty soon. But I had one question I definitely needed to ask you, which is, why are you afraid to play the best players in the world?
I have seen that a lot, right? I play the best players in the world all the time. I enjoy playing the best players in the world. I don't mind losing to the best players in the world. I love the opportunity to try and beat the best players in the world. That did not factor into my decision whatsoever, and I don't think that factored into very many players' decision either.
Yeah, I don't think it did either. I just saw it around and I thought it was completely ridiculous. So
I think that's pretty. Everyone has so many reasons I don't think anyone's avoiding anybody else. If anything, they're seeking out the best players to play against.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jared, do you have anything else to ask Zane here?
Oh yeah, I had a question for you guys from when we were chatting before. So in my echo chamber, it looks like, at least on social media, and again, this can 100% be my echo chamber. So I want to ask you guys, like, what is the chatter around this? Meaning, like, how are people viewing PPA versus MLP? It seems to me like people kind of unanimously think that MLP won the player war. Like, where does not an average viewer, but where does a very engaged pickleball fan, what are they thinking about this tour war currently?
I think that there's kind of two parts there. You said the very engaged pickleball fan. I think they, by and large, with a few people who just really like the PPA format, have decided that MLP has won this and won it fairly decisively. We can look at number of premier players signed, etc. I think also we see it kind of on our blog of people that follow pickleball closely. A lot of people actually aren't big PPA fans, mainly because of the way a lot of fans don't like how the PPA has definitely given preferential treatment to a few players in the past. That hasn't sat well with fans. So I think a lot of people have MLP winning it decisively. And we've kind of said that MLP has won it. And knowing that you are probably on the MLP bandwagon as well, I tried to today present some arguments for the PPA. And I do think it's interesting in some regards that maybe we've undersold what the PPA has done here. They've retained still the two top players, and like, we're skewed because we live in Canada, but I think I got 4 or 5 text messages just from people that don't really follow pickleball yesterday about the Jeannie Bouchard signing. You know, I didn't get a single message from anybody outside of, like, you know, Chris and my pickleball very diehard friends about any of the MLP signings. So I do wonder if in a larger picture, maybe it isn't quite as decisive as what we that live in the pickleball bubble see it as.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it's picked up by some of the national press, right? They don't even dive into where the players ended up. It's just a war. Like, that's what's happening. It's going on. It doesn't even seem like there's an indication of like who's leading, who's ahead. Yeah.
I mean, the national media stuff, like, these people, I think, have no idea what's going on. If you're not following things closely, it's hard to know what's going on. We've seen the national media articles over the past couple of years, when they come out sporadically, I think have always fallen short to some degree. And I also think a problem with what's the recent national media articles, I think there was a CNBC one, there was a Yahoo Sports one. I mean, it's only Connor Pardo talking to those people, and they're and Kyle Yates and Tyler Loong, but they're sharing really the one perspective. And MLP's clearly made a decision that they're not going to engage in any of this public warfare, at least from a media standpoint. Whereas Connor Pardo is going and talking to the media. He's tweeting about the liquidity of the PPA and trying to guarantee that publicly. I think the one thing, and maybe they're feeling better after some of these signings, but the sense I've gotten from just seeing some of these things, like Connor being as public as he has and saying in that Yahoo Sports article that, you know, he would do the deal if he could go back to do the original deal, you know, if MLP would do it, he would do that. So that gives me the sense that the PPA feels like they're behind as well, and they feel like they've lost. Although that was a week ago probably now.
Well, but isn't there's also the problem you talked about, Connor? There is an obvious trust problem. It's not just a Zane issue. We heard of basically can't keep track of the number of players that had 2, 3x, 4x offers from the PPA and were signing with MLP. I think when that's going on, it really signals that there's a large trust issue, and I think a lot of it comes down to one individual that people have trust issues with, or a couple people. You have a trust issue, and until you can get back past that, how are you going to retain players?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it because it is unfortunate, meaning like I don't know what I don't, maybe there were some short-term victories that were had because of the lies and the crappiness, but things like paying on time and paying in full, I don't think that money was the issue. Meaning, like, I don't think that they were scraping for my $700 check back in 2021, right? I didn't think that needed to happen. So why did it happen is the thing. Was it disorganization, or is it just a we take care of these players? Like, is it a power move? I don't know. And I think it didn't have to come to this. It really didn't. Like, I think if they operated and kept their promises, even just small promises, something like, well, like I remember when these graphics came out of what the gold versus the silver cards were, things like offering us Invisalign and lifetime memberships didn't come to fruition.
Oh, right? You didn't get those?
Yeah, believe it or not. I know I have great teeth.
You do.
Thank you. I know you noticed. So it didn't need to come to that. Like, it really didn't. But it's not forgotten. And I actually was speaking with Jason from the kitchen a little bit. He's like, man, I'm trying to figure out what the PPA did that makes people distrust them so much. And we came to the conclusion that, like, there was no smoking gun, but it was death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? There's just so many small little lies. It's like the boy who cried wolf, right? You just don't believe it anymore.
Well, and isn't a big part of that too? They've often lacked transparency, whether it be payouts with players, rules. Like, fans have seen it, but when you talk to individual players, there also has just been a lack of transparency as well.
Yeah, and I mean, like, at this point, there's such a long track record. You almost just think like anything that's being done has an agenda behind it, and whether it's a draw, like you see X PPA player has an easy draw, it's like, they rigged it for him or whatever, which, like, I have reason to believe was true several times. Whether it is anymore, I doubt that it is, but like there's that cloud of doubt over every single action that's taken at this point. And I think there's a reasonable cloud of doubt over any action that's taken just based on past experience.
Well, I think that's what I was sort of getting to earlier when I was fumbling around a question to you. But I think they have to change the way that they operate if they want to gain the trust of, especially the new players that they're signing. They're signing all these tennis players. If you go and sign all these players and you make promises, I don't know what they're saying to them verbally. I don't know how they're negotiating. Actually, I do know how they're negotiating with some people, and it's some of the same tactics that we've heard in the past. Pressure. You talked about timelines, things like that, misleading about what other players have signed. They're still doing these things, and if they're doing that with new players, I don't know how you can get that trust. And if you keep doing business this way, and I don't know, maybe this is a wake-up call to stop doing business this way at a certain point, because you can't. Well, maybe sometimes you can just throw money at problems, as like Live Golf. You throw enough money at people, things happen. So if I just don't know if they have the money to do that, but I wonder if they have to change the way they operate to to gain trust of new players and to get some of the trust back of maybe people who are on the fence. I don't think they're getting trust back of players like you or people who are in your camp. But that's sort of, I think, really important for them going forward if they really want to be getting new players and be retaining their current talent that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think something has to change in that regard. And again, I think it's short-term gains. You might sign somebody that you wouldn't normally have because you lied to them or said something verbally that doesn't pan out. But that's at the expense of trust over the long term. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. I would say that this was probably move 1 of 10. Like this war is maybe 10% over.
I think clearly we have just no idea what's going to happen, and we have no idea what's going on. I don't think either of us have predicted these things that have happened, and seeing some money that's gotten thrown around. So I'm so curious as to what happens, but I don't even, it seems almost pointless to make predictions, although you probably should make some predictions, because that's what's fun about all this.
Yeah, and if you're right, you get to say I was right. And if you're wrong, you just get to pretend like it never happened. So it's like there's not really any loss in just making some prediction. I don't know. Go for it. Jeremy looks like he's ready for it.
No, as I said, I think we're going to see a MLP banner in 2024, but I am curious as to what kind of ownership structure, etc., will look like.
So and just so Zane, do you have anything else you want to get off your chest, or?
Yeah. When the hell are you assholes playing Travis Rettenmeier 2-on-1? I'm ready for this shit. Let's go.
That's by the way.
He's formally said it's not happening and it's his fault. So.
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to give Travis some shit. I was so ready for that because I know exactly how to beat a one-person team. I was ready. I still want to see that happen.
We'll have to consult you if there's any future 2-on-1s on the horizon. If anyone wants to come at us for a 2-on-1, then we're still here for it.
I'll take you guys 2-on-1 against anybody outside of the top 10 in singles currently.
Have you watched us play?
No, but you're like lowish 5-0, decent 5-0.
Yeah, what's your duper, Chris?
I think it's 5-4-1 in doubles. After my PPA qualifier, it jumped up a bit in singles to, I think, what is not an accurate representation.
Yeah, I think I'm around 5-3-8, but which are there? I don't know. Those are probably fairly accurate. What is the duper rating? But
yeah, I'd say if I could train with you guys for 2 days, I could teach you to beat any singles player outside the top 10.
Any singles player or any player that plays doubles? Because it seems like a doubles player might be better at 2-on-1 than a singles player potentially.
I don't think a doubles player is better at 2-on-1 than a singles player. There's a particular skill set that you need to have to win a 2-on-1 match as the single player. So like somebody like Riley could be difficult, even though he's not necessarily singles specific. But other than that, like you need very good ground strokes to beat a 2-person team, I think, and to be fast. You need to be fast, that's for sure.
You definitely need court coverage. Yeah.
All right,
we wouldn't want to play Ben. Let's put it that way.
You guys would get crushed by Ben. I could not show you how to beat Ben.
We've watched him do some 1v2, and it seems problematic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Zane, I don't know if your swear jar counter here is 3 or 4 for your Stop Alzheimer's. So I don't know if you have anything you want to plug, but thanks for coming on. So if you want anything to plug, now's the time.
Oh my God, you guys were auditing my swears for this. I thought I had a free pass for this one. It's not the Pickle Pod, bro. No, I mean, I just want to say, I guess, thanks to the people that, thanks to those hardcore pickleball fans. Like, you know, those are the people that are bringing more and more people into the ecosystem. I remember when I first started playing, like, people were eager to show me how to play and bring me to the Cesar Chavez Center in Racine, Wisconsin. And I hope as the sport becomes more mainstream, we don't sort of lose that, where, you know, try to get your neighbor from your apartment complex to go play sometime. Like, I guess, you know, obviously I've got my sponsors that are all great. They probably don't want to be associated with a podcast like this or my opinions, so I'll leave them out of this because I'm only representing myself, the Frisco Panda, and the Orlando Squeeze here. But yeah, I'd say thanks to the hardcore pickleballers. You guys are going to be the people that really grow this sport and see if we can make pro pickleball viable as a business in the long term. And yeah, thank you guys for all the hard work that you guys do and journalisming and looking into interesting topics in a thoughtful way. So appreciate that.
Not journalist quite yet.
Yeah. But thanks for coming on, Zane.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys should go get somebody who signed PPA and have an opposite perspective. I think that there's two sides to every story. I told mine, and I think it'd be valuable to talk with somebody that's had a different experience than I have.
Well, I think Connor Pardo is jonesing to come on our podcast, so we'll see if he wants to join one of these days.
He likes to wave at us on Facebook Messenger every so often.
Well, that would be interesting.
So again, thanks everyone for listening. You can follow Zane on all socials. You can follow us, NML Pickleball, everywhere. Like, subscribe, share, everything like that. And we'll see you next time.